Finally, video 4 related to chapter 6 again, the topic of which is motivating others. So I'm at the top of page 8 on our lecture outline. We are still talking about the elements of an effective motivation program. Okay, so at the top of page 8, E says the relationship between outcomes and satisfaction requires the leader to provide salient rewards. Now remember, salient is meaningful, rewards that actually make a difference, rewards that I care about. And I cannot emphasize enough. It's the perceiver, the follower. That's who decides whether a reward is worth it or not. Motivation, as it says, works best when it's based on self-governance. Okay, so there are a variety of hierarchical needs models. These are sort of kind of useful. One of them is from Maslow. Everybody talks about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So you've got physiological, then you've got security or safety, then you've got love or social, then you've got esteem, and then finally, out of sight of the webcam, is self-actualization. Okay, that's fine, but the truth is it's not quite that simple, and the way that the theory is set up, it's very difficult to test, and in fact research that's been done in the past suggests that there are quite a few issues with that theory. So those are nice. I mean, they tell us, yeah, we need to pay attention to people's needs. Fair enough. But whether they're arranged in that hierarchy, that's questionable. Whether a person has to actually satisfy one in order to move on to the next, that's a little questionable, and so on. So we move on. An alternative perspective when I talk about needs is what's called the manifest needs model. Okay, this is McClelland. McClelland was doing his research in the 1950s. What he was most interested in was people with a high need for achievement. That's what he really wanted to understand most. And this had a lot to do with the fact that the 1950s were a time in which the United States found itself with a booming economy. And we were trying to understand not only how to promote that, but how to sustain that. And there was a strong belief, which I think was warranted, that having entrepreneurs and others who had a high need for achievement, that contributed to a positive economy. Okay, so that's why it was being studied in the 1950s. One of the things that McClelland discovered is that people often have divergent and even conflicting needs. Okay. 3 that are especially important to the workplace. I would argue that they, in fact, have an impact everywhere that we are, not just in the workplace. The first is the need for achievement. And again, remember, this is what McClelland was really, really interested in. Basically, this is characterized by, or people who have a high need for achievement are characterized by preferring moderately difficult goal setting. These folks have a strong desire for personal responsibility. It's that word, there should be single-minded task focus, okay, and a strong desire for detailed feedback, okay. So they want to know exactly how they're doing. Why? So that they know if they need to adjust their strategies at all, so that they know if they're in fact going to achieve the goal that they've set in the time frame that they've set. Whether a person has a high need for achievement or not is in fact an excellent predictor of performance, okay? And whether a person will want an enriched job. In other words, a job that, like I was describing in the last video, is what we would call a good job, right? One that has skill variety and task identity and task significance, autonomy, and feedback in abundance, okay? Now, I'll bet that most of you have a high need for achievement. One of the ways that you can sort of think about this is, are you the kind of person who at the end of the day thinks about how much you've gotten done and whether you've accomplished what you had hoped to accomplish? And if the answer is yes, you probably have a high need for achievement. Okay. Let's use a sports analogy to understand this kind of person best. So if we were to go to a basketball court and regardless of whether you're a great basketball player or not, don't worry about that. Just work with me on this, okay? Just work with me. And you have an option. You can shoot layup, okay? Boop, 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 up and in. You can do a 3-point shot, okay? So that's just past the free throw line, okay? A little bit further out. Or you could take a half-court shot. Now, what would you predict in general a person with a high need for achievement who has at least a moderate amount of basketball playing experience? What would you predict? Is a person with a high need for achievement, again, assuming the person has at least a moderate level of playing ability, okay? They're not a superstar, but they're not, it's not like they've never played basketball. Okay. What would you guess? Are they going to go for that layup, that easy shot? Are they going to go for that three-point shot? Or are they going to go for that half-court shot? You have an idea? The correct answer is the three-point shot. Here's why. The layup is too easy. Anybody can make a layup. If my grandmother were still alive, she could make a layup. Okay? There's no great whoop-de-doo, okay, when you achieve. So you make a layup and people go, it's pretty underwhelming. By the same token, or similar token, a half-court shot, man, that is tough to make. And while it would be fantastic if you made it, it would be very exciting, the odds are not in your favor. The risk is pretty high, in other words. And people with a high need for achievement do not dig high risk. They are all about moderate risk, okay? So the right answer is, again, the three-point shot. If they make it, it's awesome. And there are fairly good odds that they will be able to make it, again, especially if they have at least a moderate amount of playing ability. Okay. The second manifest need is a need for affiliation. This is when a person is characterized as having an interest in others' feelings, conformity to expectations, and they also have a strong desire for approval. So they're very concerned with their social setting. And finally is the need for power. This is characterized by a desire to influence others, to control one's environment. Every teacher you've ever had, if that person was even halfway decent, has a high need for power. Now, a person can have a high need for achievement and a high need for affiliation and a high need for a power, or low on each of those, or moderate on each of those, or some mixture across each of those, okay? It isn't that you have one and then you don't have the other two. You can be high, medium, low. You could be high, high, high. You could be medium, medium, whatever, okay? So they're not necessarily in conflict with each other in terms of, if I'm high on one, I can't be high on another. Like I said, most teachers would have a pretty high need for a power, and many would also have a pretty high need for achievement. Okay. Now, this whole issue of rewards and who wants what, again, I cannot emphasize enough. It depends on the follower, okay? The fact that the boss thinks something is a great reward doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean anything. And it's critically important that we not generalize from our own sample of one, that we do not assume that what motivates me will motivate other people. That is a risky venture and fraught often with mistakes. You're going to mess up. Basically, you've got to talk to your people to find out what it is that they find positive. What do they think would be a good reward? Now, one of the neat things worth taking a peek at is Table 6.8, which is on page 283. It says what each person wants in terms of rewards basically is going to be affected by individual differences. Could be differences based on age, differences based on education level, differences based on the kind of job that a person has, differences based on geography, differences based on gender. I mean, I could go on and on. Differences based on personality, okay? All those individual differences will affect how a person perceives a reward. Now, one of the things that I want you really to pay attention to in this text box, it pulls it out. Notice where good wages, in other words, money, lands. Now, again, you ask the average person, and they'll say, yeah, money motivates. It's a big deal. It's a huge deal. Not to everybody. Not at all. Not at all. Who, in fact, is most concerned with money? Well, no great shock here, but as it says, money is really important to those under 30, who probably haven't made that much yet, to those making less than $25,000, for reasons that should be obvious. It is tough to live well, decently, on less than $25,000 a year, especially if you're trying to raise a family. Good luck. I mean, just think about what rent costs. Just think about what car costs. Think about phone. Think about utilities. Think about food. Think about, I mean, on and on and on. And folks who are not yet in supervisory positions, all those folks are going to think, yeah, money really matters. Why? Well, because they don't have it in abundance. And remember, the basic model of motivation, an unsatisfied need, leads to that tension. It's going to lead people to focus on, I need to set a goal, and that goal is going to be, I need to make more money. Okay. F, about halfway through down the page, on page 8 of our lecture outline. The relationship between outcomes and satisfaction also requires the leader to be fair and equitable. Why? Because all human beings, frankly, they deserve to be treated fairly. End of story. EOS. End of story. As a human being, you have the unalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You deserve to be treated fairly. EOS. When we talk about equitable, we are not talking about equal. We're not. Equal is what kids care about. If you celebrate the Christmas tradition, you'll know what I'm talking about if you have siblings. When kids are little, they run down, they look under the Christmas tree. What do? They count. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How many you got? You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How many do you have? I had 6 siblings. How many do you have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6. You have 6? I have 5. Why do you have 6? That's kids. That's focus on equal. Okay, the exact same number. No sense of value. They have no sense of value. They have no sense that they might be somehow intrinsically different from one another, and therefore the value of their presence might need to be different. Okay. Adults, on the other hand, are concerned with equitable. We are not concerned with equal. I do not expect to make the same salary as Tom Kunkel, the president of St. Norbert College. That would be silly. He has a different job than I do. He has more experience than I do. Of course, he should make more money than I do, and he does. No worries, okay? I expect that. I'm okay with it. I don't feel as though I'm not being treated fairly, even though our salaries are not equal, because that's not what adults worry about. Adults worry about equity. Okay, so equity, as it says, refers to workers' perceptions, again, that whole perception thing, of the fairness of rewards based on a social comparison process. So you and I compare ourselves to other people. We do it all the time. We cannot help it. Okay? We pick somebody or several somebodies that we view as our referent others. That's the key word, referent other. These are the people to whom we compare ourselves. Specifically, we are comparing the ratio, okay, not just raw numbers, but the ratio of outputs to inputs. So outputs, inputs, outputs, inputs. What's the ratio? Okay. So there's my ratio. You know, what do I make? That's the output. To the input, what do I give? And then there's the other person, my referent other. What do they make? What do they give? And I'm looking at that rate. I'm thinking about that ratio. I'm not necessarily writing down these numbers, for example, but I'm giving it some careful thought. Outputs are the things that I get and that my referent other gets. So money, promotion, status, praise, whatever. Fill out the list of rewards. Inputs are things that we give. Okay? So I could take into account my experience, my age, my expertise, my seniority, how hard I work. And I look at what am I getting relative to what I'm giving. So, you know, when a person doesn't have a whole lot of experience, when they're young, they don't have much expertise, they're not senior, I mean, they're giving good effort, but they're new. Well, you would think that their expectation for what they would get would be similarly modest, okay? But most importantly, they would compare themselves to somebody like them. It could be themselves at the same job at an earlier, or I'm sorry, themselves at the same organization at a different point in time. And what most of us expect is that as we go forward, we will make more money. So I used to work at the university. I had different jobs there. I might have compared myself at different points in time to myself. Okay, that's self inside. Self outside, I could also have compared myself not only to the job I had at a given time, but maybe job that I had at a different organization. Or I could look at myself now, think about, how am I doing now compared to when I worked for a different organization. So inside is same organization, outside is different organization. So we can think about ourselves in the past. We can compare ourselves to ourselves in the past, okay? Then there's other. Other inside could be I might compare myself to other professors at St. Norbert College. Or I could compare myself to professors at a different university. So that would be other outside. The point being, again, that we compare the ratios, outputs to inputs, outputs to inputs. And then how does it come out? Is it equal? Awesome. Is it unequal? Not so awesome. If the other person has a better ratio than me, I might be really unhappy. Or if my ratio is way better than the other person's, I might feel really guilty. But only if I'm equity sensitive. This is at the top of page 9 of your lecture outline. People who are equity sensitive want those ratios to match. They want them to be equal. People who are equity benevolent are okay with the other person having a better ratio. And finally, people who are equity entitled are okay with themselves having a better ratio. Okay? So equity sensitive, they want it equal. Equity benevolent, they're okay with the other person's ratio being better. Equity entitled, they're okay with their own ratio being better. In other words, they don't feel any guilt. Yeah, I know I'm young. I know that I don't have a lot of expertise, but I still think I should get paid a lot more than you do. Okay. Last, Roman numeral 8, page 9, provide timely rewards and accurate feedback. We've already touched on a lot of this, but we've got another theory that's really useful for this, and that's expectancy theory. This was articulated by Victor Vroom in 1964. 3 things. Effort leads to performance, leads to reward. Key questions, and pay attention to the order in which these questions are asked. First, do we value the reward? In other words, what is its perceived importance or valence? And you want to use that word, valence. What's its value? Second, so that's the first thing you and I care about is, well, what am I going to get for this? And do I care about it? What kind of value do I place on it? Second, do we believe that the performance will actually lead to the promised reward? In other words, what is the perceived instrumentality of the relationship between performance and reward? Am I actually going to get it? So let's say I've decided I like this reward. That's great. That's good. That's positive. But I also have to believe that I'm actually going to get it. If I achieve the required level of performance, I'll actually get that praise or whatever. And then finally, do we believe that we can exert enough effort to yield the desired performance? In other words, what is the perceived expectancy between effort and performance? So do I think that if I try really, 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 really hard, that I can achieve the performance? If I don't, guess what? No motivation. So we go from right to left. Right to left as I did it, but it might look right to left for you depending on how this video works out here. It starts with reward. First of all, is there a reward? Secondly, does it matter to us? If it doesn't matter to us, no effort. Second, do we believe that that reward will actually come to us? Do we believe in the instrumentality between performance and reward? If we don't, if we think, yeah, you know what, they always promise, but they never deliver, our motivation is going to be 0. And finally, do we believe that we can exert enough effort to get to the desired level of performance? And if we think to ourselves, you know what, no matter how hard I try, it doesn't matter, I can't, there's no way I can do that. There's no way. So motivation. Okay. All right. B, timing of rewards is important. Again, just like with punishment, the longer the delay, the longer the gap between the behavior and the outcome, the less strong that relationship. Okay. The reward isn't going to matter very much if we can't connect it to whatever the performance was. Consistency of rewards is important because continuous reinforcement, as it says, that's the fastest. But if you want long-term sustainable performance, you got to reward sporadically, as I mentioned previously. And then finally, the accuracy of rewards is important because if people aren't finding out how they're actually performing, if they get rewarded no matter what, if they always get told they're amazing and awesome even when they aren't, guess what? Why would they change any of their behavior? They wouldn't. No sane person would. A rational person presented with rewards, no matter what they do, will take those rewards and it will diminish their motivation and therefore diminish their performance. And that brings us to the last of this fourth video. Thanks.